The very first rock concert, I think it was March 21st, 1952, began with a riot. They broke down the doors and started a riot.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of a tradition. I think that we try and maintain in rock and roll, some form of rebellion, even if it's just a plug being pulled.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Different Leaf, a show for new and experienced cannabis consumers. I'm Brit Smith. You may know this week's guest as the legendary founding guitarist from Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band. Or maybe you know him as Silvio Dante from The Sopranos.
What the fuck are you doing?
Sil, take it easy.
I'm losing my balls over here. This fucking moron's playing Hazel. Get the fuck out of here.
Now, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steven Van Zandt is diving into the world of weed. But unlike Snoop Dogg, Justin Bieber, and all those other celebrities who have put their names on THC-focused cannabis lines, little Stevie Van Zandt's new pre-rolled joints are not going to get you very high. Instead, their 5-packs are full of smash hits cannabis, heavy with CBD, and easy on the THC, designed to give the consumer a nice mellow body buzz, perfect for sensitive smokers, newbies, and returning users alike. The bud itself is also being grown by one of the best in the biz, a man by the name of Chemdog, another Massachusetts native who also happens to be one of the most iconic cannabis growers in modern US history. Little Steven's underground Apothecary has just launched exclusively at CannaProvisions recreational dispensaries in Lee and Holyoke, Massachusetts. And with that, Steven Van Zandt is officially coming out as an advocate for cannabis as a wellness tool and for the legalization of marijuana nationwide. Hi, Mr. Van Zandt. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Hello, Brit. Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm all right.
So I hear that you're a Massachusetts native. Where are you from?
I was born in Watertown in Boston.
We're based in Massachusetts as well. So Different Leaf, we're based on a magazine that's out in Northampton, Massachusetts. And most of our team's sort of scattered around Mass. So we're really excited to talk about something that's Massachusetts-based weed. Obviously, I'm not from here, though. I'm from London, as you might be able to tell.
I hadn't noticed. No.
Yeah, I hear you're a big fan of British invasion bands. Is that right?
That's my whole life. Yeah, my whole radio format is based on it, and it was the beginning of my life, literally. So,
who was your most inspirational band when you were growing up?
I always combined the two. It was the Beatles first, but soon followed by the Rolling Stones. They both played a critical role in convincing me that I actually had a future, because I really couldn't find one looking at the options society was offering me. So they came along just in time, my ripe old age of 13 or so.
What was it like for you getting the plug pulled on you with Paul McCartney at Hyde Park? Like, that's if you grew up as a Beatles fan, that must have been one of those, but like, that sucked, but that was also really cool.
Yeah, it was it was a moment there. You know, I had just gotten Twitter, I think, and just started using it, and I went crazy on Twitter, which made worldwide headlines at the time. It was, a silly thing, obviously. We were like 1 minute past the curfew, and but it just goes to show you that, rock and roll will always be the, rebellion art form. And the very first rock concert that Alan Freed had, I think it was March 21st, 1952, began with a riot. So the very first concert was they broke down the doors and started a riot.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of a tradition. I think that we try and maintain in rock and roll, some form of rebellion, even if it's just a plug being pulled.
Yeah, I love it. I think you probably pissed off the Queen because she lives right next door to Hyde Park.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think she would be the first one to enjoy it, actually.
Maybe she's got a rocker side to her that we don't quite know about yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so.
So like a lot of musicians right now, you have a very diverse career, including acting and political activism, and now you're moving into the world of weed, into cannabis. Tell me a bit about your background with cannabis. I know that Bruce Springsteen was not a drug doer at all. Were you a smoker?
Yes, I'm not now, but I smoked some in the 60s. I was particularly sensitive to it, so it was really very, very trippy to me. And in those days, the stuff was quite strong. And the psychedelic experience back then, for those of us who were, looking for enlightenment, we weren't doing those things to escape. We were trying to, there was no internet, there was not a lot of information about Eastern philosophy and things like that we would get into through people like Allen Ginsberg and George Harrison. But at the time, it was a search for spiritual enlightenment. That was all we were concerned with, and it was actually quite helpful at the time.
Did it help you creatively when you got on stage?
Well, I mean, it was one of those things that the craft needed to be in place. I mean, people should realize that it doesn't replace the craft. Does it perhaps provide some extra imagination into a craft that's already there? Yeah, perhaps so. But, by the time the British invasion guys, who were our mentors, started experimenting with those things, they were already fantastic craftsmen.
Right. So it's more like an enhancement of what you were doing.
Yeah, or possible expansion in some ways, but it never, one should not ever think that one can replace the craft that easily.
Yeah.
You're going to occasionally hear my dog participating here, who is just not cooperating today.
What's your dog's name?
She's Edie Sedgwick.
Edie, you're so welcome. Come on the
show. She may make an appearance very soon.
That's cool. My dog's made an appearance on this show many times. Uninvited, so do you remember your first time smoking weed?
Yeah, it was quite fun, but I was very sensitive to it. It was not quite an acid trip, which I did a few of those. But it was in that ballpark of really expanding my mind.
What about as you grew up? How did your relationship with weed change?
I had a lot of conversations with my Native American friends. My former foundation did nothing but Native American issues. So I spent a lot of time with Indians. And their thing was like, we go to the ceremonies a couple times a year, and you're transported to this sort of a mountaintop, and you pick up some information from a different sort of source. And then the idea is you come down from the mountaintop and you apply those ideas to your life, as opposed to staying high every day, all day. In other words, there's a purpose and a usefulness to it, actually.
That was a lot of the way that the Beatles seemed to talk about marijuana and drugs in general, was that sort of spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, that's what it was for us. It was not, I mean, I know people find this hard to believe, but it was nothing to do with escape. I mean, that stuff came later, in the 70s when cocaine came in, that sort of thing was more, escape oriented and entertainment oriented. But we were very serious about our marijuana and hashish, and then the early LSD experiments, which were quite strong stuff back then. And I talk about it in my book. I don't recommend it because we lost a friend. We had a friend who never came back from one of the trips. He stayed a 7-year-old because the stuff was so strong back then. It's much weaker now, which is good.
In your book, you talk about how now you see a lot more importance in this side of wellness. And I think what you're talking about back then, that was still spiritual wellness, mental health,
Yeah.
So is that sort of feeding into why you've decided to enter cannabis right now?
Yeah, that's what got me into it. There really was the virus and the pandemic. And, you start thinking, Jesus, our immune systems, need to be as strong as we can make them. And there's nothing in our society that really helps that, all of the various types of food we eat, there's not a whole lot of wellness, in the equation.
Not in the US, I'll say.
So we said, let's start a wellness program of some craft teas and lollipops and things like that. Make ginger and cardamom and pepper and turmeric, various herbs and spices that are healthy. Let's make them more readily available.
Mm-hmm.
And then that led into the CBD idea. And I had my office do some research. I said, find me the coolest cannabis people. I want something that's really, really high quality. I want it to be organic, and I want it to be a little bit more measured, more towards the CBD than the THC.
Right. Is that because you'd experienced something different with the CBD?
Well, yeah, but you also, this is going to be more medicinal oriented. Yes, there will be a nice, pleasant, more mellow high to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be balanced more towards the CBD medicinal properties that affect the body rather than the mind, in terms of the balance.
That was really important to you, and that sort of led you to CannaProvisions, where
Yeah.
you've got one of the leading original growers, Chemdog, growing cannabis out there.
Yeah. We're very, very proud for the association with him and CannaProvisions in general. We looked at a lot of people. I'm very, very meticulous when I put my name on something, and this was by far the best company that we saw, and Chemdog and Johnny Greenfingers, and that particular strain, that particular flower, really seemed to be the right one for us.
Why is it that you wanted to keep it craft and local and Massachusetts based? This seems to sort of go along with your, political activism all the way, trying to keep with the community. Is that sort of what led you to keep it in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with it. I'm not saying we won't expand at some point, but we want to make sure the quality is kept very, very high. That's my thing. I'm a quality over quantity guy, As long as we can maintain the quality, then we'll see how big we can get with it. But I wanted to make sure that the thing was the right, had the right atmosphere when it was being grown, and the right attitudes from those growing it. This seems to be the perfect beginning for us.
It sounds like it would be really good for folks who deal with a lot of pain but don't want to get super high, maybe first timers or new consumers.
Yes, all that.
But you went for pre-roll. What made you pick pre-roll over just flower?
It just seemed convenient and simple. We wanted to try and keep things simple at first.
Yeah.
And everything you said, I think it's going to be good for first time triers. A lot of people smoke to relax.
Mm-hmm.
It has a different effect. The basic thing. The flowers of all kinds have different effects on different people. For me, it always expanded my mind. And if I had 10 thoughts when I smoked, it became 100 thoughts. But most people, it works the opposite way. For most people, it does relax them. And I think our particular flower, our particular strain, is going to emphasize that also. And by the way, for the non-smokers, we are going to do some other things. We're looking at brownies and cookies, a little bit more, like I say, for those who are experiencing some unfortunate pain due to an illness or something, or just to relax and go to sleep, or to help meditate. All those things, I think it's going to be helpful. Like I say, a more mellow high. I mean, if people are interested in doing it just to get as high as possible, then ours is not the one you want. We have a different approach to what we're doing.
It sounds a bit more like the weed that you might have gotten back in the day on the illicit market, that was just less heavy on the THC, because that's really been bred up and it's really popular now to have high THC levels. But from what I've heard back in the 60s and 70s, the weed was, homegrown weed, and it was much lower in that. So it sounds like something that if you smoked back in decades ago and that was the last time you smoked, this might feel a little bit more like that old weed.
That could be, yeah. I think you could be right about that.
If you're feeling cooped up at home, why not head to your local Barnes & Noble or Books A Million bookstore and go and check out the magazine section for the latest issue of Different Leaf, our award-winning quarterly journal about cannabis culture. If you're feeling more like a homebody, just head on over to differentleaf.com and order yourself some issues right to your front doorstep. That's differentleaf.com. I want to switch gears a little bit and